Welcome. This is Red Hawk, and I'm hanging at the deep end. You know, it's interesting. I love crawling to the edge of a cliff and just looking over. And there's something about the deep end that has pulled me. And today we're going to go to a really deep place that human beings have found themselves. You see, we found ourselves in a very unique situation. And just a little journey review. You know, it starts as atoms and molecules, things and gases and matter, and all of that came into being, and it all interacted through those three essential processes, and we're going to have those over and over until all our listeners learn them, which is complexification, differentiation, semi-permeability. All of them worked on all of these things. These atoms became molecules until the complexity created life. That junction, it's still a mystery to us, but life happened. And then those three essential processes, bang, they just kept going and going and going. And evolution, you can trace the evolution through these, how everything differentiated, got more complex, and also was semi-permeable. And it all did that until life became conscious. And consciousness eventually became self-consciousness, self-awareness. Welcome to us. Welcome to the human family. We can see consequences to what we do, and we have towered above all other life and being on this planet. Human beings, self-awareness, we see it. The bird doesn't know they're soiling their nest and that it's not healthy, but we do. We do. We are the most successful predators the earth has ever produced, and we're at an interesting junction in terms of how our predatory nature gets modified and maybe prayerfully diluted. So here we are. What now? What now? Well, in the West, our roots of what now are in the Bible so much of the time. And we can see what now in the way the early Bible writers wrote, the way they have dealt with this power over creation or self. Now, in my mind, there are two approaches to this power, this authority we humans have been given over the earth. Both views are recorded in Hebrew scripture of Genesis. And I dare say it's where we get so much of our understandings. The word that is used in Hebrew is dominion. Now, I'm not going to wade into Bible verses and get into all that stuff in any significant way, other than to say that there are two versions of dominion in those early Hebrew texts. Two creation stories, each giving a different context for this concept of sovereignty over, of dominion over nature, of controlling nature. The first is from Genesis 1. It's Genesis 1 through 2:3. You can go and do your own Bible work on that. Where God gives human beings dominion over this creation. And these verses, believe it or not, have been used to justify not just our dominance over creation, but justify using it up. James Watt, many of you older folks might remember, he was a Secretary of Interior under Reagan, and he justified his decisions, basically was saying, we're called to just use it up, and when it's gone, God will reclaim it. But we can use it up. That's perfectly cool. This view of dominion is basically I own and control it, and I can do what I want with it. And then there's the second creation story. And many don't even know there is a second creation story, but it's right there with the first one, and it starts at 2:4 through 25. In regards to creation, God tells us to till and keep it. telling us that we have a responsibility towards creation to keep it up and running, if you will. So here, dominion is not ownership and control, but rather stewardship and caretaking. And we have, whether we've been given this power or it just evolved and here we are, we have this sovereignty over the earth, this power and authority to govern. And I think that's an important piece, to govern. The early Hebrews, Abba is father. And the father was the householder. That father had absolute sovereignty over the home. Now, this doesn't mean he could use everybody any way he wanted, but he had dominion and sovereignty over his household. Not to do as he wanted, as I said, but to hold all in his hand so that they were fed, so that there was fairness and there was security. A peaceful household was a fair and just place where all were cared for and treated without favoritism or bias, to run a just and impartial home. It's interesting, and this is the relationship that I see that we need to have with the planet. We need to have a context in which to understand our relationship to this unbelievable fabric. So, welcome to today. The human family has woken up to being the householders of our gracious planet. We now know and see that this fabric of life is our home. It is our home. It is in our hands. We can use it up, or we can care for it, till it, grow it into new expressions of life itself for the sake of more life, which is, I think, the intent of it all anyway. Dominion and our understanding of it puts us at a critical crossroads. Our dominion over planet Earth has far-reaching existential consequences. And this gets into a context of our story of life and the human family and who we are. How do we do that? How do we care for ourselves? How do we care for the planet? How do we create a household where everybody wins? See, that's to me is what true sovereignty is about. When you're really governing properly, what you're doing is helping everybody that you're governing to have a full life. What was it Irenae said? The full glory of God is a human being fully alive. How do we create that world? This word dominion and how we understand it is a root understanding in the human family. How we do this, how we keep this planet alive, how we allow everybody a sense of impartial fairness, no bias, and opportunities abundant for everybody. That's what I see as true dominion. Now, I just laid out a whole lot, and I'm going to call on my cohorts to jump in, because that's what we do. Marianne Rudis is coming to us from Spokane Valley. Bob Hayes is coming to us from Florida. And I'll start with you, Bob. What say you on this subject of dominion?
Well, I think that it's very, very interesting and important today to distinguish between those two types of dominion that you just articulated. And the second type is the more evolved interpretation of the word. And I think that, again, keeping in mind the processes of that you've talked about, complexification, differentiation, semi-permeability, these things are all part of our understanding of what we have dominion over. And that's what is sort of a new concept, because, yeah, it works in the household, it works in the town, it works in the clan, and so forth. But now we're looking at a planet-wide system, if you will, that we share dominion with every other human being and every other animal on the planet. And it's the interconnectedness of all of these. We've talked about a planetary mind and evolving consciousness and so forth. We have to begin to see all of the interconnected parts as essential to the whole. And if we begin to look at our policies, whether they're political or scientific or whatever, if we don't broaden the focus to look at all of the different interactions, then we're doing a disservice and we're not exercising dominion in the larger sense of caring for. Because we don't know what potentials we are losing when we marginalize groups instead of bringing them in and using the strengths that they have to improve the larger planetary system or the larger country. If we want to just look at our own personal countries, we have to see that we can't have dominion if we don't have dominion over all. We have to be caring for all, and we have to be seeing how all of those pieces fit together. And I think that is the real step forward in our definition of the term, and whether we are going to take that responsibility that is thrust upon us if we are going to exercise dominion.
Yeah. And, it just can't be hodgepodge anymore. We have to be more intentional and contextual with it. Marianne, what are your opening comments on this?
Well, I'm not sure you're going to want to hear them because I completely am triggered by the word dominion. Mm-hmm. I will put that out there.
No,
and it is something that I think it's the epitome of human hubris to even think that we have dominion over the planet, over the animals, over everything. I would say we have responsibility. We have responsibility for our actions, and as having an apparent more evolved brain, an apparent more evolved way of being in the world, that we do carry quite a bit of responsibility to not destroy things that have no power to destroy us. And yet, I mean, if you look at nature, you could say nature has dominion over us. I mean, one hurricane, one earthquake, and we can be completely wiped out. And I get that this is tied to consciousness, but I think consciousness is something that we don't completely understand anyway. We don't know why we have consciousness. We don't know where it comes from. Studies are showing that it doesn't come from inside the brain, that there's something else going on here. So how do we know other species don't have consciousness? How do we know that there isn't something more at play? So I think it's, for me, I think it boils down to responsibility rather than dominion. And so anyway, that's my
I will say that's one of the definition of dominion. It's just not the one that made it into our main consciousness, which is basically
or dictionary.
Well, that's right. But if you read what sovereignty means, it has to do with governing. And then you get into the whole system of governing. I think you put your finger on the main piece, Marianne, and that's responsibility. We have an ability to respond. And I think, and I have a stewardship model of dominion, I think that we have to. Now that we've seen how we can affect the whole planet, we have to take responsibility for that. And that means our understanding, we can either grow the planet or we can destroy it. That's what dominion is. One view is we can use it up because God said we could. And the other is God said, you got to till it. It's never yours. I'm lending this to you. So I think the whole concept of the ability to respond as responsibility, I think that is huge. The word dominion's not going away. Just like the word, in one class I taught, someone said, we just need to do away with the word faith. And I went, yeah, that's not going to happen. But we can start seeing different aspects of faith, not doggedly believing something, but we can start understanding it. And I think the same is true of dominion. And I think both of you said key words to me. Bob, interconnectedness. Once it's interconnected, you cannot extract yourself from it. Two, the responsibility. Once we see the power we have, and we have the power, there's no doubt about that. We can, we're right on the edge of it on a nuclear thing. I think that's closer than, the clock is moving up. It has to do with our understanding of what we're a part of, and that we are, and I like the ancient household of Abba, and I'm not a patriarch, but the whole concept of being caretakers, of we're the ones that can create justice or injustice. We can create a world where the rich rule and the rest of us are peasants, or we can create an egalitarian world where everybody has a say, everybody's educated. Those are two different understandings of dominion, and it's unfortunate that the James Watt understanding is the one that has gotten into our brain and triggers us to think it's a bad thing. Now, I will say this, I'm informed. When I got out of college, I got a job at a place called New Dominion Wilderness School, and it was basically in Virginia, which is the old Dominion, right? And the whole concept was that these boys could take control of their lives in a way that was so responsible that everybody won. And I think that to me was very helpful in my understanding of that word, and probably why I'm not triggered, Mary Ann, because I understand that very well. Nobody wants us to have control over me. That's part of what's going on the planet. And people are willing to give up their power for the sake of security. And so there are all those control issues in there. But what I'm suggesting is that we somehow sell that second definition of dominion, because the word dominion is not going away. As a matter of fact, I believe it's going to become more prevalent. It's going to be used more and more in the way people talk and politicians talk. So, to me, how do we do that, Bob?
Well, I was just going to spin back to you were just mentioning that we have to give up power in order to interact in this larger, more enlightened sense of dominion. I think the main problem is today, the people who have the real power don't want to give it up.
Well, and I think, you misunderstood what I was saying, because I don't think some people need to give up power and some need to just go and take it. And that's the issue, that power is never given freely.
Well, yeah, and that's what I was getting at when I was talking about how we have to look across all of the different types of groups that make up our planet, and see how we can make them all fit in more smoothly by giving up power, by taking more power, by exercising power in a cogent, enlightened manner. And yeah, as you say, some people are going to have to take more power. Other people are going to have to be either persuaded to give up power, or it's going to have to be taken away from them. And defining who that is and how that all happens, that's the real evolutionary problem that we're at today, because we've got excess of 3 billion people on this planet, all wishing to have as much power as they can and be in as much control over their lives as they can. And we all have to decide, wherever we are, how do we fit into this larger structure, and how do we exercise the power that we can take and use in a way that's not going to be harmful to someone else who's seeking a happy, successful life. And it's a struggle, because every day we see the adversarial relationships that exist between these various groups. And
well, now we're getting into the weeds, because I want to talk about the human families. We can talk about all the conflicts and the divisiveness and the wedges, but the fact is the human family has dominion. We have it. And I know that might be a trigger word, but it's there. And that power is now recognized, and we're beginning to see how, in all the intricate ways we've affected and effected the life systems on the planet itself. And we have the power to do something about it or not. We have the power to just use up all the oil and don't worry about renewable or not. And that dominion that we have, how do we talk about that in a positive way and begin to create a narrative that allows us to see ourselves as part of each other? Because everything we've talked about here, the interconnectedness, the oneness, one of the assumptions of the deep end is we are all part of each other. So we are this one piece of creation that now has power over all of creation. How do we deal with that? How do we sell a way of appropriating that power? Now, the Constitution of the United States of America, I've been reading some papers from the Constitutional Convention and stuff. Those were the very issues they were trying to sort out. So, Marianne?
Well, I was just going to say, yes, the interconnectedness is key. And if we are the ones that are driving the train, we're in the engine, and we're the ones that are creating circumstances for every car that is on this train as well, then we have to, in order to use our power, we have to be able to see that every single thing that we do affects everything else. And we may or may not be able to trace what that's going to be. And you used the example of the wilderness school where these kids are learning a win-win situation. And I think that's where we have to start learning to wield power, where I can wield my own and have my own power without diminishing you and your power. And I think that's where we have to, as human beings, as people that can destroy this planet right now, we have to come to a place of we're connected, and everything that we do has a ripple effect. And so let's wield that power. So, I mean, and I know I'm talking about animals a lot, but just the way that we are destroying animal habitats. It's been shown that the elephants follow the ley lines of the earth, and they're part when they migrate and when they move, and they're part of this delicate balance. Well, as we start fencing things, and as we start building cities, and as we tear down forests, and we start to destroy our environment, the environment for these other species that have a part to play as well. And I think that's when we will be able to wield power wisely, when we can kind of understand that it's not just about us winning. It's about everyone and everything winning.
Yeah, and I think that what comes out of what you were saying is our power is with, not over.
Yes.
It's we have to see that we are now the spokespeople for creation herself. We can't just take my own personal interest into consideration. We have to see the whole ball of wax in that. It's interesting that they used to be called ferry paths, which were basically deer paths, and where animals used through the forest. And in Europe, when they started building places, they put the cornerstone of many churches on those ferry paths. And we find out that those ferry paths are usually at a place of where two rock lines come together, like quartz and granite, where there are different. They're not just random through the woods. They're somehow tracking through different elemental understandings that are beyond our conscious stuff that animals still have. Kind of like whatever it is, my dog allowed my dog to get home from being on the other side of town. Whatever those senses are, they were at play in those animals. And now we are beginning to see that. We are beginning to, I think of Jane Goodall's work with chimpanzees, and how much more knowledgeable we are with the whole concept of primate life and how similar it is. And now we have DNA showing that they're more similar than we ever would have thought. And we're learning how to create habitats for the animals that were running out. We didn't care about that 150 years ago, but we're beginning to care about that. Think about the zoos that I went to growing up. Those zoos aren't acceptable in most cases anymore. The zoos are trying to create more friendly environments for the animals themselves. The whole way of consciousness. And Bob, when you were talking about different groups, I kept thinking those who call us woke. Those of us who are becoming awareness of it now, it's a put down to be awake. And yet, if we're not awake, we're going to all die. It just amazes me on all of those fronts. This whole concept of dominion, though, I want us to see that the human beings have dominion over the earth. And, I love the one line in Pulp Fiction where the big thug has just gotten raped. And Bruce Willis says, "What now?" And he goes, "I'll tell you what now. There is no what now." Well, we got a big what now, and the whole human family is sitting at the crossroads of what now. And we better think for our grandchildren, because if we don't, they will curse us. And I guess we're kind of at the end for our final comments. I hate to say it, but Mary Ann, final comments.
Well, I still think, when we know better, we'll do better. The idea that we are leaving this whole planet in the hands of human beings when, don't get me wrong, I think we are capable of extreme goodness and extreme interconnectedness, but there are also some really, really horrible things that human beings do to each other. And so I think that, yes, as we learn more and as we know better, we have to do better. But we also have to change the way that we think of ourselves on this planet. And we have to understand that we are all connected and everything is part of one whole.
Amen. Bob, final comments?
Well, I'll maybe elaborate on that a little bit. Probably the single word that's been used most in this particular episode is we. And the thought I have is, well, how do we broaden this concept of we? Because we don't all think that we have dominion or that we need dominion, or we don't all think of dominion in the terms of caring for. And how do we take the power from the we's that don't think like this in a humane way? And I don't know if that's possible. I'm falling into my pessimistic side. But right now, this little group of us that are woke, if you want to accept that term, are getting overcome by the people who want to be asleep and like to be asleep. And they like to give over their control of their lives to the people who will not give up power and who don't care if the planet dies as long as they live their life in luxury. And that is, again, that is the crucial point that we have to get to, that we really begin to think of ourselves as we and not as competing groups. And I hope that we can get there.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a very good segue to our next podcast, because where we're going to go is to the blessings and the curse of comfort. Yeah, comfort. See, I like being comfortable, but at the same time, being comfortable doesn't move me. It does. It really moves me to just continue in my own comfort. And so something's happened. And the thing about it is, if enough of us get so comfortable that we don't really care, that we quit being part of the world, that we quit, we bitch, but we don't do anything about it, well, that's where comfort becomes a curse. That's where comfort actually becomes a tool of those who are really comfortable. And believe me, that's exactly what's happening. And this is the conversation that our founding fathers had with the Federalist Papers. And it wasn't just about comfort, but it was about people becoming so, comfortable in their own ways that they're open to a demigod. You see, comfort works many ways. It's both a blessing and a curse. What are we going to do with our comfort? Are we going to help us move, or are we going to just keep sitting and being entertained? Oh, my friends, be well, wonder deep, and in all things, may you be blessed.